That day, at my wife's funeral, between the sound of waves and the quiet laughter of our two kids, the lawyer placed an old faded ship ticket in front of me. It read, SS Celestine, Voyage 72. No will, no inheritance, just that piece of paper. Oliver chuckled. Dad, you're still living in the past. But I knew. Margaret never did anything without meaning, and that's when the real journey began. Before we go on, subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from. I'm Henry Collins, 70 years old, once a chef on ships that crossed the Atlantic. My whole life has been tied to fire, to salt, and to the drifting souls of the sea. After I retired, I opened a small place by the harbor. Just fish soup and bread. Simple, quiet. Mine. Margaret was different. She belonged to light, to paintings, galleries, Paris, and all those elegant invitations. We were such opposites, yet somehow we shared over 40 years together. I cooked for her, and she taught me how to see beauty in the cracks of a wine glass. Now, she lies still beneath the earth, and it feels as if half of me was buried with her. Our kids, Oliver and Amelia, stood on each side of the grave. Their eyes stayed on their phones more than on their mother's photo. I can't blame them. They grew up fast chasing profit charts and glittering parties. Only I remained, silent, clutching that old ship ticket in my hand. The edges folded ink faded, but the name SS Celestine still clear as day. I had never heard of that ship, and I've worked on dozens across Europe. The will reading took place in a small church room, mist still clinging to the windows. Mr. Morell, the lawyer, spoke in a steady, almost sleepy tone, like reading the weather report. Mrs. Margaret Collins leaves all property galleries and assets to her two children, Oliver and Amelia Collins, he said. Then he looked at me, his voice slowing down. As for you, sir, she left only one keepsake. A pale envelope sat before me, inside that same ticket, and a small note written by hand, for the one who never stopped waiting. Oliver let out a quiet laugh. Amelia looked down, almost pitying. Dad, Oliver said Mom always loved her little romantic gestures. Maybe she just wanted you to keep a memory. I didn't answer, only nodded. But deep inside, something stirred, that same instinct that had saved me more than once at sea. Nothing was over yet. After the funeral, I returned to our small house by the lighthouse, where Margaret's piano once played every night. The scent of lavender she kept by the window still lingered. Soft, sad. On the dining table, her last glass of wine remained lipstick, fading on the rim like an unfinished goodbye. I sat down, laid the ticket under the lamp. The paper was brittle yellowed, but on the back, carved faintly, I saw a string of numbers, 4.2279. April 22nd, 1979. The year we met. Not on the Celestine, but another ship. I was the cook. She was a 26-year-old passenger sketchbook in hand and eyes I could never forget. Yet, she never once mentioned Celestine. A gust of wind blew through, knocking the ticket to the floor. When I picked it up, I noticed something a corner peeled back, revealing a small anchor seal, and the words, Port de Le Havre. My heart raced. Le Havre, the northern port of France. I'd docked there dozens of times, but never once heard of the SS Celestine. I opened the wooden chest under the stairs where I kept all my old logbooks and sea tools. Among the salt-stained pages, one record caught my eye, brittle and yellow. At the bottom, a single line made my blood run cold. SS Celestine, Voyage 72, departed Le Havre, April 22nd, 1979. Crew lost. I sat there for a long, long time. Same date, same year. A vanished ship, and my wife, who never lied to me, never kept a secret, left behind a ticket with that very mark. I didn't know what the truth was, but one thing was certain: Margaret wanted me to find it. Outside, a ship's horn echoed faintly through the fog. I turned toward the sound, toward the white curtain of mist hiding the horizon. A strange feeling grew in my chest. Maybe the secret I'm about to uncover isn't just hers, but mine too. And that's when I decided to leave Saint-Malo to search for the ship called Celestine. I left Saint-Malo early the next morning, the fog still wrapped around the lighthouse, and the cries of seagulls echoed across the rooftops. My old car rolled away from the coast road, heading north toward Le Havre, where the SS Celestine had made her final voyage. I didn't tell Oliver or Amelia. They'd only think I'd lost my mind, clinging to some meaningless memory. But deep down, I knew Margaret never did anything by accident. The coastal road stretched on in silence. Every time I caught sight of the ocean, her image returned, silver hair glinting in sunlight, soft voice, painting stories of ships on canvas. I used to think that was just her way of showing love for the sea. Now, maybe those paintings were memories. By the time I reached Le Havre, rain had started to fall. The port was nothing like I remembered: giant cranes, stacks of containers, and the thick smell of engine oil. I found the old fisherman's tavern I used to visit when I worked on cargo ships. It hadn't changed: dim yellow lights, weathered wooden tables, and a thin man sitting alone in the corner, eyes burning like coals. I walked over. "Excuse me. Do you remember a ship called the SS Celestine?" He looked up, studied me for a long while, then said in a rough, gravelly voice, "People don't talk about that ship here anymore." I pressed on. "Why, I just need to know. It really existed, didn't it?" He chuckled softly, poured himself another drink. "I was a mechanic's assistant on the Celestine. Back in 1980, she left this port on a moonless night. 3 days later, rumors spread she went down offshore. But there was no wreck, no bodies. A few weeks after that, the police told us to keep quiet, called it a technical incident." He paused, staring into me. "Only one survivor, a woman. I never knew her name. She disappeared soon after. No one ever saw her again." I gripped my glass heart, pounding. Margaret. No, it couldn't be. She'd said she was living in Paris through the 80s. But what if she was that woman? The man slid a small, worn piece of paper across the table. "I've kept this for 40 years. They paid me to stay silent. But there's one thing I never forgot: this symbol." On the paper was an image of a ship surrounded by light, the same emblem engraved on the back of the ticket Margaret left me. I walked out into the rain, facing the harbor. Drops stung my face, and it felt like I was stepping into a story my wife had written long ago, waiting for me to read the next page. I followed the pier to the Le Havre Maritime Archive, where every vessel's record from the last century was kept. Inside, the air was cold and heavy, rows of metal cabinets, drawers full of yellowed papers. I handed the librarian the ticket. She frowned, flipped through a ledger. SS Celestine. Strange. Not in the official registry. But she pulled out a thin file tied with gray ribbon. This one was withdrawn from the system in 1981. No copies allowed. I opened it carefully. Inside were voyage logs and a few faded black and white photos. One of them stopped me cold. A woman stood on the deck, shielding her eyes from the sun, hair whipping in the wind. Her face, Margaret's face. I had to grab the edge of the table to keep from falling. Below the photo, a handwritten note read, "Passenger M. Hayes survivor, April 1980. Hayes, Margaret's maiden name." I stumbled out of the archive in a daze. The sky had turned violet, rain still falling hard. I found a small hotel near the port, rented a room, and spread everything across the desk: the ticket, the paper, the photograph. Every clue pointed to one place: the Celestine, and a woman who vanished in 1980. I opened my phone, looked at our wedding photo, and whispered, "What did you hide from me, Margaret?" The sound of waves outside the window murmured back, soft, distant, almost like a reply. Even now I could feel her, guiding me somewhere, step by step. That night, I couldn't sleep. One question kept circling in my head: if she was the only survivor of that sinking, then what truly went down with the Celestine by dawn? I had made up my mind. Next stop, Milan, where Amelia was displaying her mother's final painting, the one I'd never dared to look at closely. I arrived in Milan late in the afternoon, sunlight spilling across the old buildings and cobblestone streets. This city has always felt distant to me, too loud, too polished. Nothing like the quiet stillness of Saint-Malo, the place Margaret and I once called home. I'd promised her I'd never step into Amelia's glittering world of art and galleries. But today that world might hold the answer to everything. The Atelier Collins Gallery sat in the heart of Brera, elegant, modern, and cold. As soon as I walked in, I heard the sharp sound of heels on the marble floor. Amelia appeared dressed in black, her face perfectly made up. She looked just like her mother, except for her eyes distant guarded. "Dad," she said, surprised but not pleased. "I want to see your mother's painting," I answered quietly. "The drowned horizon. You're showing it right." She frowned slightly, then gestured for me to follow. We walked down a long corridor lined with paintings signed M. Collins. At the end she stopped before a large canvas, a stormy sea waves crashing under a blinding light. And at its center a ship. I knew it instantly. It was the same image, the one on the ticket. And on the seal, from Le Havre. I stepped closer, my hand trembling as it brushed the thick oil paint. "When did your mother paint this?" I asked. "About 10 years ago," Amelia said. "It's her most famous work. I'm selling it soon to a collector in Zurich." I stared at the canvas. The light in it seemed alive, pulling me in, as if Margaret herself was inside watching me breathe. "Have you ever thought," I said slowly, "that maybe Mom wanted us to see something more? Something beyond the painting?" Amelia gave a small, amused laugh. "Dad, Mom was an artist. You never really understood art?" Her words stung, but I didn't react. Instead, I ran my fingers along the frame. In the bottom corner near the wood, a tiny crack caught my eye. I pulled gently and a small folded paper slipped out, falling to the floor. Amelia froze. I bent down, picked it up, and unfolded it. It was a letter handwritten unmistakably Margaret's. The paper had yellowed, the ink smudged, but the first line made my throat tighten. "If someone finds the ticket, follow the light. What you think is lost is still there." I gripped the letter, heart pounding. Those few words pierced straight through me. She was talking about the Celestine, about something she'd kept hidden all along. Amelia looked at me confused. "Dad, what did Mom leave?" I shook my head. Didn't answer. Instead, I spread the paper on the table and noticed something else inside it. A small photo of a ship's cargo hold. On the wall, written in chalk, were the numbers 727. That number, I'd seen it before. I pulled out my phone and opened Oliver's old email, the one about Mom's art fund. The account number ended with 727. My chest tightened. It wasn't just a keepsake. Margaret had left a trail, the ticket, the painting, the number. Each clue fitting together too perfectly. I held the letter again, trembling, grateful, and terrified all at once. Even in death, Margaret was still speaking to me through these small traces. She knew I would search, and that I'd be the only one patient enough to understand. When I looked up, Amelia had stepped back, arms crossed. "What are you doing, Dad?" "You think Mom was hiding something?" "Not hiding," I said softly. "Keeping. Keeping what for who I don't know yet. But I will." She sighed, turned away. "If you want the painting, take it. I've got enough memories." I shook my head. "No. You keep it. But remember this, sometimes inside a painting, people bury their confessions." I left the gallery as the city lights began to glow. Outside, I stopped at a small cafe and opened my phone. I studied the photo from the letter, the cargo bay, the chalk mark. Below the number 727, faint words appeared: cargo manifest. Private account. I understood then. Cargo wasn't cargo. It was the account Margaret used to hide something. Maybe money. Maybe truth. I took a deep breath. The Milan night wind cut cold across my collar. The pieces were fitting together, but the final picture was still missing. I opened a message window, ready to call Oliver, then stopped. If Margaret had chosen me to play this last move, Maybe silence was part of it. She used to say, "To see the light, you must stand in the dark long enough." And just as that thought crossed my mind, my phone lit up an unknown number, from Geneva, where Oliver lived. A man's voice came through calm and sharp. "Mr. Collins, we need to speak to you. It's about account 727. That voice on the phone, deep cold, it nearly stopped my breath. The man introduced himself as the director of Helvetia Bank Geneva, the very place Margaret had visited a few times in her final years. She'd said it was for art exhibitions, but now I knew. The ticket, the letter, the number 727. None of it was a coincidence. It was a code, and it was finally starting to unlock. 2 days later, I was in Geneva. The city lay quiet beside Lake Léman, calm and still almost too peaceful for the secrets it held. Helvetia Bank stood there in glass and marble, everything shining perfect. Just like the world Margaret once belonged to. A silver-haired manager greeted me with a polite smile. "We received an internal notice," she said. "Account number 727 under the name Margaret Hayes Collins. It can only be accessed if the co-beneficiary presents the original verification artifact." I placed the ship ticket on the table. She studied it for a moment, then nodded. "That's the one. Please follow me." Inside the vault, she retrieved a thick file bound with a red ribbon. When she opened it, I saw Margaret's handwriting across the first page. "If you're reading this, Henry, then you've understood light doesn't always come from where we expect." I turned the first page. Transaction records. Dozens of transfers from galleries, art foundations, even accounts under Oliver's and Amelia's names. But at the bottom, a single line in bold froze me. Current balance, 42,000 Susan dollars. I stared at the numbers stunned. Margaret. She had moved everything, every dollar our children thought they'd inherited, into one secret account. Number 727. The manager gave me a knowing smile. She was a very clever woman. "But there's something you should understand. This account can only be activated if both legal heirs sign a release giving up their inheritance." I looked up. "So if Oliver and Amelia keep their shares, the funds stay locked forever?" She nodded. "Exactly. She arranged it 7 years ago. I believe she meant this as a lesson." I sat there in silence. It all made sense now. Margaret hadn't been punishing anyone, she was restoring balance. A final move in a quiet game I hadn't realized we were both playing. That evening I went to Oliver's hotel. He opened the door looking worn out, his face pale and tired. "Dad," he rasped. "I'm in trouble." The Swiss police questioned me about my crypto investments. They said they're linked to Mom's art account. I looked straight at him. "Do you know about account 727? He froze. His eyes flicked away. "Dad, how do you know about that?" I told him about the ticket, the painting, the letter. He said nothing for a long time, then finally muttered, "Value, Dad, in this world, the only thing that has value is numbers." I turned toward the window, watching the city lights shimmer across the lake like scattered fire. "Then your mother just proved you wrong." The next morning the police came. They searched Oliver's accounts and Amelia's gallery, suspecting money laundering through fake art sales. The news spread like wildfire. My children, once proud to have inherited everything, now stood at the edge of ruin. I felt neither joy nor sorrow, only release, because now I understood why Margaret had chosen me. I was the only one still calm enough to see the board she'd been playing on all along. That afternoon I returned to the bank. The manager handed me a small envelope. She asked that you read this when you're ready. Inside was a single handwritten note. "Henry, if the children finally understand, give the light back to them. Don't keep it for yourself. I trust you'll know what to do." I folded the letter carefully, my hands warming as if someone had just placed theirs on mine. Outside, snow began to fall, melting softly against the glass. I looked out toward the quiet lake, the boats resting still in the mist. I understood now. Margaret hadn't left behind money, she'd left a chance. And I, the man who once thought he'd been left behind, was now the one holding it. I decided to return to Saint-Malo. the place where this story began, and where I would finish what Margaret had started. I returned to Saint-Malo on a gray, cold afternoon. The sea was the same vast, quiet, and distant like the hollow left inside me. After all that traveling across Europe, I'd come full circle, only to realize every answer had been waiting right here. Here where Margaret and I once built our little house, planted lavender by the fence, and promised we'd watch the last ship sail when we retired. The door creaked open to the scent of salt and damp wood, old friends greeting me again. On the table lay the SS Celestine ticket edges, frayed now yet heavier than any will or inheritance. I poured a glass of wine and opened Margaret's final letter, the one from Geneva. Her handwriting trembled slightly, but still carried that calm painter's grace. If you're reading this, then perhaps the light has arrived. But light isn't just to see, it's to lead the way. Outside, the sun was sinking, spreading a soft gold across the sea. And that's when it struck me light. Celestine wasn't just the ship's name. It was the message she'd been sending all along. That night I went to Oliver's house. He looked older, his hair a mess, his eyes tired. The mansion that once screamed pride now stood hollow and still. "Why are you here, Dad?" he asked, voice rough. "I'm not here to blame," I said quietly. "I'm here to give you what your mother wanted you to have." I placed in front of him a copy of Margaret's letter and the charter for the new foundation I'd just created. The Celestine Foundation. "This will bear her name," I said. "The $42 million, it's not mine and it's not yours. It belongs to the light she tried to keep alive. For struggling painters, for children who can't afford to learn art, for those who still believe in beauty without needing wealth." Oliver stared at me, eyes glistening. He nodded slightly, whispering, "I thought Mom hated me." I smiled. "No, son. She just wanted you to see what can't be bought. She loved you more than you ever knew." The next day, Amelia returned. She hugged me for a long time, wordless. Then she handed me something small, Margaret's old paintbrush. Mom said, "If I ever found the courage, I should give this back to you." I smiled softly. "Then maybe now's the time." That evening, the three of us sat together in the little kitchen that once echoed with Margaret's laughter. No anger, no tears, just silence, gentle, healing silence. I told them about my journey, the ship, the clues, the meaning behind that ticket they once mocked. When I finished, the room was still, only the sound of the waves outside. Oliver finally asked Dad, "Was the ship real?" I looked toward the window, where moonlight shimmered over the water. "Real or not, doesn't matter anymore," I said. "What matters is that it took me where your mother wanted me to go." The next morning I walked down to the harbor with the ticket in hand. There they had just restored a section of the SS Celestine, a memorial exhibit. I stood before the steel hull, tracing its cold surface, hearing echoes of the sea from 40 years ago. On the deck, a plaque read, "Dedicated to the lost souls of Voyage 72. Below it, almost erased another line, "And to the one who waited." I laughed softly, tears rising. "I'm still waiting, Margaret." I set the ticket on the railing. The sea breeze lifted it, carried it away, and just then a beam from the lighthouse cut through the fog landing right where I stood. Everything stopped, the wind, the waves, even time. I heard her voice faint as a breath. "When I'm no longer there, look toward the light." I smiled and closed my eyes. It felt like her hand was on mine again, warm, steady, peaceful. And I knew our final voyage had reached its harbor. Not an ending, a beginning. Since then, every morning, I opened the little cafe by the port, serving the fish soup Margaret loved most. On the wall hangs a single painting, the drowned horizon. No one knows a letter once hid inside its frame. Each night the lighthouse beam still cuts through my window. And sometimes when the waves crash just right, I swear I can hear a distant ship's horn, a quiet reminder that one soul departs, so another can finally find its way home. My story ends here, but your voyage is still just beginning. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe so I can tell you more journeys. where love, forgiveness, and faith always find their way back no matter the storms. Because who knows? Maybe the next story will help you see your own light.